lightning, storms, and ice-cold water. Here lie over 240 souls, perished on the Dutch VOC ship the Rooswijk. This is a film about the largest maritime excavation undertaken by the Netherlands, to find and study a unique treasure hidden in the deep. A cooperation by the United Kingdom and the Netherlands with continuous round-the-clock surface supply diving in harsh conditions.
You're in the water, it's really dark, you're in a place that a lot of people died. There was a lot of panic obviously going on at the moment at the wreck.
You've got your bell with the lights and everything, and then it's just a black hole. And out you go.
Using the latest techniques, we catch a glimpse of what life was like on the ship and uncover its riches.
That's the M from Mexico,
That's right.
This is the story of the Rooswijk. The Rooswijk was a Dutch East India Company vessel. In January 1740, it set out from the Dutch island of Texel, its destination, the city of Batavia, modern-day Jakarta in Indonesia. The ship carried goods and supplies for the colonial economy in the east, an outward journey expected to take up to 8 months. One day after the start of its journey, it was caught in a terrible storm near Kent. Desperate to find a safe haven in the UK, they changed course when tragedy struck. The ship ran aground on a sandbank, and all souls perished. With them, a staggering 30 chests full of silver bars and over 36,000 coins were scattered on the seabed. In 2016, a joint survey on the site was undertaken by Historic England and the Cultural Heritage Agency of the Netherlands. Many Dutch and English maritime archaeologists are involved. The current state of the wreck was mapped, and it was concluded that there were still numerous objects to be found. But it also became clear that the wreck was threatened and that it would disappear, torn apart by fishing nets and eaten away by shipworm, if nothing would be done.
De Rooswijk is een VOC-schip met veel mensen aan boord. De VOC is economisch gezien natuurlijk echt een grootmacht geweest. Het zeggen we wat over de economische geschiedenis van Nederland. Maar het werd ook bedreigd, ernstig bedreigd. En we hebben wel een verplichting om ook daar bewust mee en goed mee om te gaan. Nou, de Engelsen hebben dat ook. Die hebben het schip aangewezen als een monument, een designated wreck site. En die voelden die verplichting ook. En daardoor zijn beide landen bereid geweest om daar geld aan te besteden.
It will be one of the largest archaeological excavations in Dutch history. For a period of 90 days, archaeologists will be based on this diving support vessel, the Terschelling. On site, a so-called 4-point mooring system is installed. 4 anchor stones on the seabed, indicated by large buoys, are tethered to the Terschelling. Between those buoys, the ship has free movement above the wreck, without having the need to drop an anchor, and so possibly damaging the Rooswijk.
Ik kom net terug van mijn derde duik op de Rooswijk. En bij deze derde duik heb ik deze prachtige olielamp gevonden. Eigenlijk Dan die heeft het handvat, of de houder, waar de olielamp in rust gevonden bij zijn duik. En ik ging naar beneden, ging in hetzelfde gebied duiken waar Dan aan het werken was. En daar vond ik eerst de onderkant van de lamp. Dit stak uit het zand. Toen ben ik rustig daaromheen gaan opgraven. En toen bleek dat het om inderdaad deze prachtige lamp ging. En toen ik daar boven water kwam, kwam Dan naar me toe met het handvat wat hij had gevonden en deze bleek er perfect in te passen.
You're in the water, it's really dark, you're in a place that a lot of people died, there was a lot of panic obviously going on at the moment at the wreck. It's like a jumble of different artifacts all together, but once you start paying attention you pick up exactly what they are. And when you're using the airlift, you're clearing a fine layer of sand, and sometimes you get a spoon coming out, it could be pewter jug. So it's not only big cargo, but things that were probably used by the sailors on board. So once they go through the conservation bit, you might be able to tie one of these artifacts with a name, which is quite unique because you're talking about the people who are on board.
You've got your bell with the lights and everything, and then it's just a black hole, and out you go. There's a lot of particles in the water, so your hat light is bouncing off of it, which makes it so it's just streaming past your face. And so once you're down on the bottom looking at stuff, you can see maybe, if you're lucky with the airlift, and that's all right. But it makes it harder to do. When we first got here, the visibility was very good. We had 4 meters, 5 meters, and now to be diving it without that, it makes everything a lot harder.
To help divers map out the finds, a metal construction is placed above the site, which gives divers a frame of reference to work with. Within this frame, finds are tagged using an acoustic system.
Wat we hier hebben op het plaatje is zoals de bodem eruit ziet, of eigenlijk net voor de opgraving uitzag. Het is een soort sonar. Het geeft de diepte van de bodem weer, de exacte diepte. En daaroverheen zie je 2 rechthoeken. Dat zijn waar we de grids, de opgravingsstellages hebben neergezet. Dat zijn 2 hele grote, zware frames om een gevoel van coördinatie te hebben. En alle puntjes die je ziet, die gele puntjes, dat zijn alle vondsten die we eruit hebben gehaald. En dat wat grijzige, dat zijn stukken hout.
Systems such as this make up the modern diving support vessel. Mark James gives us a tour of the Terschelling, where the divers spend most of the project days.
It's very much a working ship, so we've got a lot of bits and pieces about which are all relevant to the project. We have things like the cargo basket here, so this gets lowered down to the seabed and we put our airlifts in here, we bring up artifacts with this and anything we might need to work with on the seabed. We have big water storage tanks, these are called IBCs, and we use these just to keep the artifacts and any finds wet as they're coming up from the seabed, otherwise they start to fall to pieces. So these are really, really important to the project. We have the diving bell over here. So because we're in harbour at the moment, we've put it on the deck, but normally this hangs out the side of the boat, and this is basically a lift for the divers to get from the surface down to the seabed. So this here is a Kerby Morgan 17B diving helmet. This is pretty much a standard helmet across the diving industry. It's been around for years and it's a very good, safe, easy to use helmet. It's a bit different from normal diving, which is on scuba, so you have the cylinder of air in your back. But we are fed with air from the surface that comes down through this umbilical, and then it has a normal regulator like you'd find on normal dive equipment on the front of it. And then we have things here to go on to bailout. We can flush the hat down, but we also have a light and a video feed which goes directly to the surface. So the dive supervisor can see exactly what you're doing at all times. So this is where the dive supervisor sits and manages the dives for us. We have a number of video screens up here. So this is where the feed from the video camera on the diver hat comes through to. So we're able to see exactly what he's seeing on the bottom.
Okay, because it should be pretty slack, shouldn't it? Whether the bagging's caught around something.
The supervisor controls your depth, your time, your stops and everything else. So the diver just has to think about working and not trying to manage his bottom time. This was all built into the shelling, so as you can see, it fits in perfectly. Our dive superintendent actually built this system, so he knows it very, very well. But yeah, it's been custom made for shelling.
The Terschelling allows the archaeologists to dive 24 hours a day. When weather and tide allows, they work deep into the night, and as the weeks go by, more and more artifacts are lifted from the seabed. At departure, the holds of the Rooswijk held more than 36,000 silver coins. Now they lie scattered on the ocean floor.
It is corroded though. It's like, but it's one bulk.
Have we got any more? No. I don't think it matches any of those shields.
No, but my first impression would have been Zealand, because of the water that's running through it, where you can see it's, where is it? Here's Zealand.
Yeah.
So if it's corroded away, it becomes one mass.
Pillar dollars.
The pillar dollars, yeah, the clippers.
Ranging from dates so far we've had this time round. Rex for King, Philip the Fifth, Hispan Ind, so Spain.
King of
and
the Spain,
Indies.
yeah, and Indies.
So that's a pillar dollar. So Johan, here we have an example of the VOC's company money that we're going to buy and trade with. We have the cobs, cob 4 and the cob 8, so pieces of 4, pieces of 8, and then we have the pillar dollar. I mean, just look at this 8. Here you can see the date 1729.
Yeah, that's a nice one. That's the M from Mexico.
That's right.
Yeah.
So where it was minted. So that's travelled, a hell of a distance, all the way from the Americas over to Europe, and then it was going to go to Indonesia. So it's
all over the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All finds are collected and transported to this warehouse in Ramsgate. Here, saltwater pools are used to store the artifacts and prevent them from degrading. Archaeologists and students use a number of different techniques to study and catalog the artifacts.
So the object comes in, we record that it's arrived at the warehouse, we record all the movements of things as they come in. We then start the process of registration. So we will take photographs, still photographs of them, measurements, take the weight, and then we'll start to evaluate them. We'll do an assessment of what condition they're in, a bit about the object itself, and then the potential for analysis, what types of techniques that we could use to learn more about them that the specialists can apply a bit later. And then finally the conservation requirements, so what types of techniques we'll have to use in order to get them into a stable condition, basically bring them from a wet condition from the site, in which they have a lot of salts from the seawater, to a stable dry condition where they can be studied and displayed in a museum.
Most of the time, however, it's not entirely clear what kind of objects the team are dealing with, as salt water and nearby iron can have devastating effects on the artifacts.
Wow, this is a really large concretion from the site, and it's really good to see it in here in the warehouse, in the lab. We've got a number of different shapes that are formed by iron, definitely. There's certainly lots of iron, including iron bars in here. Some rounder shapes that could be other types of objects, probably iron again. But lower down, we have some wood as well. And I believe on one side, there's actually some glass bottles too. I think that's on the other side of the concretion. So we're seeing a large mass that was formed largely by the iron, and as it was corroding under the sea, a lot of other objects were trapped inside, including pieces of wood, glass, other artifacts. That's the base of what we call an onion bottle. which has a large dimple and a really round shape. You can see it's not complete. This one is broken, but it's stuck in the concretion. But this one is a lot more complete. You can see almost the whole shape, round shape, because that's why we call it an onion bottle, because of that shape. And you can see the neck as well. And that'll be a challenge, but we should be able to remove those from the concretion without damaging them. Some more building materials, a piece of brick, of course wood here, and you can see that there's you can see some of the marine boring damage of what they call the Teredo worms, which sort of make tunnels in the wood, so you can see evidence of that. But some of the wood which is more deep inside the concretion might be much better preserved.
One of the techniques used to study the objects coming off the wreck is the David laser scanner. This machine enables the archaeologist to create a 3D model of an artifact. One of the key tasks of the Rooswijk project is to enable students easy access to the finds and the data. In this way, the project lays the foundation for a future generation of archaeologists.
Studenten archeologie, studenten conservering. We hebben zelfs studenten die zich bezighouden met digitale technieken. En die kunnen dus de archeologen en de conservatoren helpen met het openstellen eigenlijk van de informatie naar een algemeen publiek toe. Die maken hele mooie animaties bijvoorbeeld. En zo zijn er ook nog wel bijvoorbeeld amateur-archeologen die meedoen met het project. Heel veel mensen leren hiervan. En uiteindelijk hopen we dus ook dat die informatie op een makkelijke en toegankelijke manier bij het algemene publiek terechtkomt. Want uiteindelijk is het wel zo, als we veel meer leren over ons verleden, dan begrijpen we ook onze eigen identiteit. En begrijpen we ook waarom we zijn zoals we zijn.
Spreading public awareness about heritage is key. So in order to give the people of Ramsgate an idea about what treasures lie just a few miles out from their town, the team has organized an open day.
I've loved it, talking to you. I think we need to do more of this sort of stuff in Ramsgate. Be aware, certainly the Goodwin Sands aren't really all that well publicised, and anything to do with that. And considering that's a real treasure in relation to Ramsgate, and not a lot of people know it.
It's wonderful, absolutely fascinating to see how things are pulled up and what they were used for. And what yet to discover, you know, the huge blob at the end and what it might be. It's just really interesting, and the children have thoroughly enjoyed it as well.
No, I knew about the Goodwin Sands. I didn't know about this particular shipwreck, so I find it really interesting now. I live in Ramsgate. I used to live in London, and I'm a mudlarker. I go down to the Thames quite a lot, finding bits and pieces. So this is very interesting to have on my doorstep.
Ja, helemaal fantastisch. Ja, ik vind het geweldig. Ik ben hier al een paar dagen nu. En ja, ik heb echt steeds iets van, er is altijd wel wat nieuws te zien. Als je bij één artefactstuk kijkt van, oh ja, die heb ik al gezien. Hé, maar wacht, dat hoekje heb ik nog niet gezien. Er is altijd wel wat nieuws te bekijken. Dus dat vind ik echt geweldig.
I've been to a few visits abroad with my dad in his yacht to places like Dunkirk and Plymouth and places like that. But I never thought that there would be a shipwreck with as exquisite artifacts as that lying under the Goodwin Sands.
For this year, the project has come to an end. The team managed to do over 100 dives with 19 surface supply divers. 200 square meters of ocean floor were excavated, and 2,000 find numbers have been catalogued. All the finds are being brought to Portsmouth at the historic England location for conservation. Here they will be analysed, stabilised, and finally conserved. After this process, museums can request objects for exposition. Next year, the story of the Rooswijk continues.